Some of the biggest stars of Hollywood's golden age were living double lives, burning with forbidden passion behind the studio gates, while the world saw only perfection. Their smiles, their marriages, their images were carefully crafted illusions. But behind that glamour were secret romances so intense, so dangerous, that they were buried for decades. Studio executives silenced the press. Publicists invented stories. Powerful men and women risked everything. Careers, marriages, even their public legacies, to protect affairs that would have shocked audiences around the world. Some of these secrets were whispered about for years. Others remained completely hidden until long after the stars were gone. From a secret child born in silence to a president's hidden love. From lifelong private devotion to explosive on-set betrayals, these are the untold stories that shaped Hollywood itself. The truth is far more scandalous than the headlines ever were. These are 10 Golden Age stars who were secretly having an affair. And the truth behind each story is even more compelling than the films they made. Number 1. Clark Gable and Loretta Young. In the winter of 1935, two of Hollywood's brightest stars traveled north to Washington state to film The Call of the Wild. Clark Gable was 34, already one of MGM's most valuable leading men. He had won an Oscar for It Happened One Night, and was seen as the ultimate masculine hero. Loretta Young, just 22, was a rising star known for her beauty, poise, and devout Catholic faith. Their on-screen pairing promised box office success. What no one expected was that behind the cameras, away from the watchful eyes of the press, their brief affair would create one of the most carefully buried secrets in Hollywood history. Filming conditions were harsh, remote locations, long nights, and a sense of isolation far from the usual studio environment. That distance from Hollywood's control created space for something unexpected to happen. Accounts from crew members decades later described a growing intimacy between Gable and Young during the production. Though Gable was married at the time, he had a reputation for charm and womanizing. And Young, despite her religious convictions, was not immune to his charisma. Their relationship was brief, but it changed everything. When Young discovered she was pregnant, the stakes were life-altering. In 1930s Hollywood, an unmarried actress with a child faced professional ruin. Morality clauses were strict, and studios managed personal lives with ruthless precision. Scandal could end a career overnight. MGM and Young's camp devised a plan to protect everyone involved. Loretta quietly disappeared from public view, citing illness as the reason. For months, she remained out of sight, giving birth in secret at a Catholic home for unwed mothers. In a carefully orchestrated move, she returned to Hollywood and shortly after adopted a baby girl named Judy, her own biological daughter with Gable. The cover-up was meticulous. Gable never acknowledged the child publicly, though insiders were aware. Judy Lewis grew up believing she had been adopted, unaware of her true parentage. She noticed the physical resemblance between herself and Gable as she got older, particularly the ears, a signature feature of the actor, but no one would confirm the truth. Loretta raised Judy as her own adopted daughter, maintaining the story for decades. For Young, the decision was shaped by fear and faith. Her religious beliefs would not allow an abortion, but public acknowledgement would have ended her career. For Gable, whose carefully constructed image as Hollywood's masculine ideal was paramount, any scandal involving an illegitimate child could have derailed his stardom at its peak. He financially supported the child quietly through intermediaries, but kept his distance publicly. The truth finally emerged decades later, in the early 1990s. Not long before Loretta's death, family members confirmed what had long been whispered in Hollywood circles. Judy Lewis herself published a memoir in which she pieced together the story that had defined her life. She described the emotional impact of growing up without acknowledgement from her father and learning the truth only as an adult. This was more than a secret romance. It was a story of a powerful man, a vulnerable young actress, and an entire industry determined to preserve its illusions. The affair produced a child who lived in the shadow of a hidden truth for decades. It remains one of the most striking examples of how far Hollywood would go to protect its stars and how personal lives were shaped and sometimes shattered by studio control. Number 2. Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. In 1942, Katharine Hepburn walked onto the set of Woman of the Year to meet her co-star for the first time. Spencer Tracy wasn't just another leading man. He was already one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. He had won 2 Academy Awards, was deeply admired by his peers, and carried himself with quiet authority. Hepburn, fiercely independent and quick-witted, was used to commanding any room she entered. When they met, she famously remarked that she was too tall for him. Tracy, without missing a beat, replied that he would cut her down to size. That moment marked the beginning of one of Hollywood's most enduring and closely guarded love affairs. Tracy was a devout Catholic and married to Louise Treadwell, with whom he had 2 children. Divorce was not an option for him, both for religious reasons and because of his personal loyalty to his wife, who had devoted her life to caring for their son John, who was born deaf. Hepburn understood those boundaries from the start. Their relationship would never be public, never official, yet it grew into a partnership that lasted more than 25 years. Their chemistry on set was undeniable. Over the course of 9 films together, they portrayed couples who clashed and connected with a natural ease that audiences adored. Off-screen, they built a private world away from public eyes. Tracy maintained a home with his wife but kept a small bungalow on the MGM lot, where Hepburn often stayed quietly after filming wrapped. Studio insiders knew about their relationship, but the press remained silent. The unwritten rules of the studio era meant that powerful stars were protected, and journalists avoided stories that could ruin careers. Hepburn adjusted her life around Tracy's rhythms. She didn't pressure him to leave his wife, nor did she seek public acknowledgement. She traveled with him discreetly, visited him during filming, and created a kind of parallel life that existed entirely in the shadows. Friends described how she softened around him, becoming less guarded than she was with anyone else. Tracy, known for his struggles with alcoholism and bouts of depression, relied on Hepburn's presence as a stabilizing force. As Tracy's health declined in the 1960s, Hepburn devoted herself to caring for him. She moved into the same house and nursed him through his final illnesses, yet even then the boundaries remained intact. When Tracy died in June 1967, Hepburn did not attend his funeral. She stayed away to avoid causing pain to his family, honoring the quiet arrangement they had maintained for decades. Hepburn spoke about Tracy sparingly in public. Only years later did she fully acknowledge the depth of their relationship, describing him with a mixture of admiration, love, and acceptance of the unconventional bond they shared. She never married, and those who knew her best understood that her heart had belonged to Tracy. Their affair wasn't built on scandalous headlines or sudden revelations. It was sustained through loyalty, privacy, and shared understanding in an era when appearances mattered above all. Theirs was a love that defied convention but respected boundaries, existing quietly behind some of Hollywood's most celebrated performances. It remains one of the most poignant hidden romances of the Golden Age, an enduring partnership that thrived not in the spotlight but in silence. Number 3. Marilyn Monroe and John F. Kennedy. By the early 1960s, Marilyn Monroe was more than a film star. She was a global phenomenon, an image of beauty and vulnerability that fascinated millions. Behind that image was a woman struggling with loneliness, health issues, and a constant need for genuine connection. At the same time, John F. Kennedy was reshaping American politics. Young, charismatic, and photogenic, he brought glamour to the White House. In the public imagination, they represented 2 separate worlds, Hollywood fantasy and political power. In private, those worlds briefly collided. Their connection formed through social circles that blurred entertainment and politics. Peter Lawford, a British actor married to Kennedy's sister Patricia, often hosted exclusive gatherings in California. Monroe was a frequent guest. Kennedy attended these events during his visits to the West Coast, and it was in these private, insulated spaces that their flirtation deepened. She was at the peak of her fame, he was at the height of his influence. Their conversations were said to be playful but intense, with Monroe captivated by Kennedy's charm and intelligence, and Kennedy intrigued by her mixture of sensuality and fragility. Because Kennedy was married and the presidency carried immense scrutiny, every meeting required secrecy. Aides arranged transportation under aliases. Phone calls went through intermediaries. Monroe's visits to the East Coast were disguised as work trips, but insiders noticed patterns that were too precise to be coincidence. Later testimonies from Kennedy's close associates suggested that their relationship was brief but real, marked by intense private encounters rather than a long-running romance. The most public moment came on May 19, 1962. Madison Square Garden was packed with 15,000 people for a Democratic fundraiser celebrating Kennedy's upcoming 45th birthday. Monroe walked on stage in a form-fitting rhinestone-covered dress so tight she had to be sewn into it. She sang "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," in a whispery, intimate tone that stunned the crowd and electrified the press. To the public, it was a bold, slightly scandalous performance. To those who knew, it was the only visible crack in the wall of secrecy surrounding their connection. After that night, political advisors grew increasingly nervous. Kennedy's administration was navigating Cold War tensions, civil rights struggles, and the constant threat of scandal in a media landscape that was beginning to change. Monroe's emotional instability and dependence on prescription drugs added further risk. By the summer, contact between them diminished. Kennedy's team made sure that any traces of the relationship disappeared from public view. The affair took on a mythic quality after Monroe's death in 1962. Conspiracy theories flourished, blending fact and speculation, but credible accounts painted a picture of a woman drawn to power and a man accustomed to compartmentalizing his personal life. Monroe was reportedly infatuated, speaking to friends about feeling a unique connection with the president. For Kennedy, it was a fleeting relationship carefully managed, quickly contained, and never meant to be public. What makes their affair so enduring is its intersection of two symbols: the ultimate movie star and the President of the United States. It was a story lived behind locked doors and whispers, surfacing only through a single song in a crowded arena. Decades later, it remains one of the most discussed hidden relationships of the 20th century, revealing how even the most powerful figures in politics and entertainment couldn't entirely keep their secrets. Number 5. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. In 1962, the production of Cleopatra was already infamous before cameras finished rolling. It was the most expensive film ever attempted, plagued by delays, illnesses, and escalating budgets. Yet it would be the love affair between Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton that turned the troubled production into one of the most explosive scandals Hollywood had ever witnessed. Their relationship began as a spark between two powerful actors on a chaotic set, and soon ignited into a global spectacle that challenged cultural norms and rewrote the boundaries of celebrity exposure. Elizabeth Taylor was 30 at the time, a two-time Academy Award winner and one of the most famous women in the world. She had recently married singer Eddie Fisher, having taken him from her close friend Debbie Reynolds in a highly publicized affair. Her life was already under constant scrutiny. Richard Burton, 46, was a respected stage actor from Wales, known for his Shakespearean power and magnetic voice. He was married to Sybil Williams and had a reputation for intensity both on and off stage. When the two met on the Cleopatra set in Rome, they were both established forces and both married to other people. Their attraction was immediate. Crew members described their flirtation as electric, obvious to everyone around them. They spent long hours together between scenes, often retreating to private dressing rooms or hidden corners of the sprawling Cinecittà studios. At first, they tried to keep their affair quiet, but the intensity made discretion impossible. Photographers captured their first public kiss aboard a yacht in the Mediterranean, and the images raced around the world. Newspapers published them on front pages. The Vatican issued a formal condemnation, labeling their relationship erotic vagrancy. It was not merely gossip, it became a moral flashpoint. Both were defiant. Taylor was used to public judgment and refused to apologize. Burton, though initially less comfortable with the attention, did not end the affair. As filming continued, their passion intensified. Their scenes together, Cleopatra and Mark Antony, were charged with a realism that audiences could feel off-screen. Their relationship began dismantling their marriages. Fisher filed for divorce. Burton's wife did the same. By 1964, Taylor and Burton were married, and their union became a media phenomenon, unlike anything before it. Their marriage was as passionate as their affair, fueled by love, ego, and tempestuous personalities. They bought lavish homes, traveled constantly, and were followed by paparazzi everywhere they went. Yet their relationship was volatile. Fights were legendary, reconciliations just as dramatic. They divorced in 1974, remarried a year and a half later, and divorced again in 1976. Even after their final separation, their bond remained powerful, often described by friends as unfinished. The Taylor-Burton affair marked a turning point in how celebrity relationships were covered. The scale of media coverage was unprecedented, signaling the arrival of a new era where the private lives of stars could dominate global headlines. It blurred the line between performance and reality, between Cleopatra and Antony on screen, and Taylor and Burton off it. What began as a secret on a film set grew into a scandal that consumed two marriages, reshaped their careers, and captivated the world. Their affair wasn't just about passion. It became a cultural event, testing the limits of public morality and celebrity power. Decades later, their love story remains one of Hollywood's most famous, an explosive union that burned brightly and publicly, changing everything in its wake. Number 5. Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. When 20-year-old Lauren Bacall arrived on the Warner Brothers lot to film To Have and Have Not in 1944, she was an unknown actress with a singular presence. Tall, poised, and with a voice that was both smoky and self-assured, she immediately commanded attention. Her co-star, Humphrey Bogart, was 44, already a major Hollywood figure. His performances in The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca had made him the embodiment of cynical sophistication. He was also married to Mayo Method, a fellow actress whose marriage to Bogart had become notorious for explosive arguments and public scenes. When Bacall and Bogart met, the attraction was immediate and dangerous. The chemistry between them on set was palpable. Director Howard Hawks noticed it instantly and encouraged Bacall to lean into the understated confidence that became her trademark. The now famous line, "You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve?" wasn't just a line of dialogue. It was a genuine reflection of the flirtation simmering beneath the surface. Off camera, they began spending time together during breaks, exchanging long glances and private conversations that everyone on set recognized as something more than acting. Bogart's marriage to Method was already strained. Their volatile relationship, fueled by alcohol and constant fighting, was an open secret in Hollywood. Yet Bogart was not known for reckless romantic entanglements. With Bacall, something shifted. She represented a calm counterbalance to his storm. A young woman who didn't try to tame him but understood his rhythms. Their relationship deepened rapidly during filming, moving from flirtation to a full-fledged secret affair. They met in private apartments, away from the gossip columns, relying on a small circle of trusted friends. Bacall was inexperienced in Hollywood politics, but she quickly learned the rules of discretion. Bogart, aware of the risks to both their careers, moved carefully, but he didn't pull away. By the end of production, their relationship was no longer a fleeting set romance. It had become something serious. In 1945, Bogart initiated divorce proceedings. ending his tumultuous marriage to Method. The affair became public knowledge shortly afterward, but instead of scandal destroying them, the public embraced the couple. In a quiet ceremony at Bogart's farm in Ohio, he and Bacall married. Theirs was an unusual Hollywood love story. It began as an affair but grew into one of the industry's most admired marriages. They appeared together in multiple films, including The Big Sleep and Key Largo, solidifying their status as an iconic on-screen and off-screen duo. Their marriage wasn't without challenges. The age gap, his struggles with drinking, and the pressures of Hollywood life tested them. But Bacall's loyalty and Bogart's devotion built a foundation that endured. She adapted to his world with maturity beyond her years, and he, for the first time, found stability in his personal life. They had 2 children together, and Bacall became an integral part of his life as he navigated his later career. When Bogart was diagnosed with esophageal cancer in the mid-1950s, Bacall stayed by his side through his illness. He died in January 1957, and Bacall, just 32, became a widow. She later spoke of him with unwavering love and clarity, describing their bond as transformative. Their story stands out because it didn't end in tragedy, betrayal, or scandal. It began that way but evolved into a lasting partnership. In a town where affairs often ended careers, theirs became a rare Hollywood example of a scandal that turned into genuine devotion. Audiences saw it in their films, felt it in their chemistry, and believed in their love. Decades later, Bogart and Bacall remain one of the most iconic couples in film history, a reminder that not every hidden romance was destined to burn out. Number 6. Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner. By the late 1940s, Frank Sinatra was at a crossroads. He had risen from a skinny kid from Hoboken to the most famous singer in America. His smooth voice had filled concert halls, radio airwaves, and movie screens. He was married to Nancy Barbato, his childhood sweetheart, and together they had 3 children. But behind the wholesome image, his career was faltering. His personal life was restless, and his marriage was strained. Then came Ava Gardner, young, beautiful, and one of Hollywood's most magnetic stars. Their meeting would ignite one of the most passionate, volatile, and ultimately heartbreaking affairs of the era. They first encountered each other at a party in 1943, when Gardner was still a rising star under MGM contract. Sinatra was captivated immediately, but their lives moved in separate orbits for several years. It wasn't until the late 40s that their paths crossed again in earnest, and this time, the timing was combustible. Sinatra's fame was dimming, Gardner's was ascending, and both were craving something real. Their attraction was instant and undeniable. The affair began quietly, hidden behind closed doors and late-night phone calls. Sinatra was still married, and Gardner was wary of becoming tabloid fodder, but neither could resist the pull. Soon they were spotted together in nightclubs and at private gatherings. Gossip columnists began hinting at their relationship, fueling a scandal that grew louder by the month. Sinatra's marriage to Nancy began to publicly unravel under the pressure, with Nancy refusing to grant him a divorce for several years. Their romance was passionate but chaotic. Sinatra was deeply insecure about Gardner's growing stardom and her natural independence. She was a woman who refused to be controlled, and that both thrilled and terrified him. They fought often, sometimes in private, sometimes in public. Close friends described their relationship as like lighting a match to gasoline. Yet beneath the volatility, there was genuine love. Sinatra showered her with attention, wrote letters filled with longing, and openly told friends she was the great love of his life. In 1951, after his divorce was finalized, Sinatra married Gardner. Their union was explosive from the start. Financial troubles, career instability, and constant media scrutiny surrounded them. Sinatra's career hit rock bottom in the early 50s. Concert halls were half full, his recording contract was terminated, and Hollywood stopped calling. Gardner, meanwhile, was flourishing, starring in films like Showboat and Mogambo. The power dynamic had shifted. Ironically, it was Gardner who helped him secure the role in From Here to Eternity, the performance that would resurrect his career and win him an Academy Award. But even success couldn't stabilize their marriage. Gardner's love for travel, independence, and occasional affairs, combined with Sinatra's jealousy and self-destructive tendencies, created a cycle of breakups and reconciliations. They separated multiple times, yet never fully severed their bond. In 1957, after years of turbulence, they divorced. Neither truly got over the other. For the rest of his life, Sinatra spoke of Gardner with a mix of longing and regret. He famously called her the love of my life, and she admitted privately that their connection had been unlike any other. Even when they were apart, they remained emotionally entangled, writing letters and keeping in touch until her death in 1990. Their affair and marriage captivated the public because it was raw, glamorous, and real. It wasn't built on image. It was two powerful, complicated people colliding at the height of their fame. It burned bright, burned fast, and left both changed forever. Number 7. Ingrid Bergman and Roberto Rossellini. Ingrid Bergman was one of the most adored actresses of the 1940s. With her luminous beauty and understated elegance, she had captivated audiences in Casablanca, Gaslight, and Notorious. Her image was that of moral integrity and grace, a devoted wife and mother who represented everything Hollywood wanted the public to believe its stars were. By 1949, she was married to Dr. Petter Lindström, a Swedish neurosurgeon, and was raising their daughter Pia. She was at the height of her career. Then she decided to work with an Italian director named Roberto Rossellini. The choice would set off a storm unlike anything Hollywood had ever seen. Bergman reached out to Rossellini after being moved by his post-war film Rome, Open City. She wrote to him personally, offering her talents for future collaborations. Rossellini, an innovator of Italian neo-realism, was intrigued by the idea of working with a Hollywood star. She traveled to Italy to make Stromboli, a film set on a remote volcanic island. Away from the rigid control of American studios, something unexpected happened. Bergman and Rossellini fell deeply in love. It wasn't a fleeting set romance, it was intense, personal, and transformative for both of them. Their affair unfolded quickly. Bergman became pregnant with Rossellini's child before either had ended their marriages. In the Hollywood of the late 40s, this was unthinkable. News of her pregnancy broke while she was still legally married, and the reaction was swift and brutal. American audiences felt betrayed by the woman they thought they knew. The press vilified her, religious groups condemned her, and even the U.S. Senate weighed in. In a remarkable moment, Senator Edwin C. Johnson of Colorado publicly denounced her on the Senate floor, calling her a powerful influence for evil. It was one of the harshest public reactions any film star had ever faced. The scandal effectively exiled Bergman from Hollywood. Her once sterling reputation collapsed overnight, studios dropped her, and her name disappeared from marquees. She divorced Lindström, married Rossellini in 1950, and gave birth to their son, Renato. They eventually had twin daughters, Isabella and Isata. She stayed in Europe, collaborating with Rossellini on films like Europa 51 and Journey to Italy. These films were critically admired but commercially modest, and they cemented Bergman's shift from Hollywood star to European artist. For years, she remained a controversial figure in the United States. Churches preached against her. Movie theaters banned her films. Yet through it all, she didn't apologize. Bergman once said, "People saw me as Saint Ingrid. I am not a saint. I am a woman, another human being." Her refusal to conform to the public's expectations marked a turning point in how celebrities navigated scandal. Eventually, time softened the outrage. In the mid-1950s, she returned to Hollywood, giving a triumphant performance in Anastasia in 1956. The role earned her an Academy Award and symbolized her professional redemption. She continued working in both Europe and the US, her career flourishing once again, though the memory of the scandal never fully disappeared. Her affair with Rossellini was more than a personal relationship. It was a cultural earthquake. It exposed how deeply audiences had invested in the moral images Hollywood constructed, and how quickly that illusion could shatter. Bergman went from beloved star to public outcast, and then to respected legend, all within a decade. The scandal surrounding her affair remains one of the clearest examples of how private choices could ripple through the entire fabric of Hollywood's golden age. Number 8. Gary Cooper and Patricia Neal. By the late 1940s, Gary Cooper was one of Hollywood's most admired figures. Known for his quiet strength and moral authority in films like Sergeant York and High Noon, he represented the idealized American man on screen. Off-screen, he lived a complex private life. He was married to Veronica "Rocky" Balfe, a New York socialite who had transitioned gracefully into the role of movie star's wife. Their marriage had survived numerous flirtations and rumored affairs, but nothing prepared either of them for Patricia Neal. Neal was just 21 when she met Cooper on the set of The Fountainhead in 1949. She was a promising young actress from Kentucky, newly arrived in Hollywood, with striking talent and self-possession beyond her years. Cooper, then 48, was captivated. Their on-screen chemistry was powerful, but what developed off-screen was deeper and more dangerous. He pursued her with a mixture of charm and intensity that overwhelmed her. She later described being swept into something she didn't fully understand. Their affair began quietly, but it grew serious quickly. Neal fell in love completely, believing that Cooper might leave his wife for her. He took her to secluded houses, whisked her away on secret trips, and wrote her passionate letters. Friends observed how different he was around her, more animated, more vulnerable, but Cooper's Catholic upbringing and loyalty to his family created an unshakable barrier. He had no real intention of ending his marriage, even as his relationship with Neal deepened. When Veronica Balfe discovered the affair, the confrontation was explosive. She went to Neal's home and slapped her across the face, a moment that would haunt Neal for years. Cooper, faced with the fallout, retreated to his family, but he didn't end the affair. It dragged on for several years in a painful cycle of passion and separation. He would leave Neal emotionally devastated, then return, unable to let go entirely. She was young, vulnerable, and deeply in love with a man who belonged to someone else. The emotional toll on Neal was immense. Her career was ascending, but privately she was unraveling. She later spoke candidly about the damage the affair caused, calling it one of the defining heartbreaks of her life. For Cooper, it became one of his most complicated personal chapters. He was a man celebrated for portraying moral integrity, yet behind closed doors he was living a contradiction. By the early 1950s, the affair finally ended. Cooper recommitted to his marriage, which endured until his death in 1961. Neal went on to marry author Roald Dahl and build a celebrated career of her own, winning an Academy Award for HUD in 1963. Yet even decades later, she spoke of Cooper with a mixture of tenderness and pain, acknowledging how deeply the relationship had marked her. Their affair was not a public scandal. It was conducted in private, known within Hollywood circles but shielded from gossip columns by studio control. Its impact was personal, not political or cultural. But it offers one of the clearest windows into how the moral image of a star could differ profoundly from their real lives. Cooper and Neal's relationship was passionate, complicated, and ultimately unsustainable, leaving behind emotional scars that neither fully escaped. Number 9. Joan Crawford and Clark Gable. Joan Crawford and Clark Gable were two of the biggest names in Hollywood's golden age. At MGM in the 1930s and 40s, they stood at the top of the studio's star system. Crawford, the ambitious, stylish leading lady who had risen from humble beginnings, and Gable, the embodiment of masculine charm and rugged authority. Their names were box office guarantees, their faces were everywhere, and their lives were carefully managed by studio executives. What few outside Hollywood knew was that behind this public image, The two stars shared an on-and-off affair that lasted for decades, an enduring connection whispered about in backlots, dressing rooms, and executive offices, but never acknowledged publicly. Their relationship began in the early 1930s during the filming of Dance, Fools, Dance. Both were married to other people at different times, but that didn't stop their attraction. Gable was married to wealthy socialite Rhea Langham, whose fortune had helped propel him into the Hollywood elite. Crawford, meanwhile, had married Douglas Fairbanks Jr., a union that combined glamour with ambition. Yet on set, their chemistry was unmistakable. Crew members noted the way they lingered near each other between takes, sharing private jokes and long looks that spoke volumes. Unlike many brief Hollywood affairs, theirs didn't fade when filming ended. It evolved into a complicated recurring bond that spanned years. Sometimes they were lovers, sometimes close friends, sometimes distant. Gable, known for his roguish charm, was drawn to Crawford's intelligence and determination. She understood the mechanics of Hollywood, as few others did. Crawford, in turn, admired Gable's masculinity and vulnerability. He could match her intensity, and she could meet him as an equal, something rare in that era. MGM executives were well aware of their relationship. The studio system operated like a machine, managing stars' personal lives to protect profits. Public revelations of their affair would have jeopardized lucrative box office pairings and the carefully crafted public personas of both stars. Louis B. Mayer and his publicity teams controlled the flow of information ruthlessly. They scheduled press appearances, fed gossip columnists sanitized stories, and made sure photographers never caught anything that couldn't be explained away. Over the years, Crawford and Gable reunited during gaps in their respective marriages and other romances. Their connection persisted through different phases of their lives, even as Hollywood itself changed. Colleagues described how, whenever they worked together, the old spark returned easily. It wasn't just physical chemistry, it was familiarity, shared ambition, and mutual respect. They had weathered scandals, career shifts, and marriages, yet their bond endured quietly. One of the most revealing aspects of their relationship came late in Gable's life. In 1960, when he died shortly after filming The Misfits, Crawford was devastated. Though they had not been romantically involved for years, she openly mourned him. She referred to him as one of the few men she had truly loved. Her grief hinted at the depth of a relationship that the public had only ever glimpsed through rumors. Their affair never became a tabloid headline in their time, not because it wasn't significant, but because the studio system kept it buried. It wasn't a brief scandal like Taylor and Burton's or a moral firestorm like Bergman and Rossellini's. It was quieter, longer, more complex. Two major stars, bound by chemistry and circumstance, navigated their connection in a world where every personal choice was filtered through studio strategy. Today, their story offers a glimpse into how power, secrecy, and genuine emotion could coexist in old Hollywood. Crawford and Gable didn't break the system. They operated within it, building a relationship that lasted decades in whispers rather than headlines. Number 10. John Wayne and Marlene Dietrich. In the late 1930s, Universal Studios brought together two unlikely stars. John Wayne, still years away from becoming the towering symbol of American masculinity, was a hard-working actor looking for roles that would finally make him a household name. Marlene Dietrich, by contrast, was already an international sensation. Her films with Joseph von Sternberg had made her one of the most recognizable faces in the world. She exuded sophistication, confidence, and a provocative charm that defied the era's moral expectations. When Wayne and Dietrich met during the production of Seven Shinners in 1940, their connection was immediate, surprising everyone who knew them. Wayne was married to Josephine Sayens, with whom he had 4 children. He came from a conservative background and projected an image of rugged all-American virtue. Dietrich represented something entirely different. Born in Berlin, she was cosmopolitan, sexually liberated, and fascinated by men who were her opposite. She had a reputation for pursuing relationships on her terms, and disarming even the most guarded men with her directness. Wayne's unpolished masculinity intrigued her, and her worldliness fascinated him. On screen, their chemistry crackled. Off-screen, their affair began almost as soon as filming did. Their relationship developed in private, shielded by a close network of studio insiders who understood how to keep powerful stars' secrets. They met in Dietrich's dressing room, shared long evenings in hotel suites, and found ways to be together between shoots without drawing the attention of the press. Unlike the explosive public scandals of Taylor and Burton or the moral outrage surrounding Bergman and Rossellini, Wayne and Dietrich's romance thrived in quiet shadows. Those who worked on their films later described their connection as passionate and genuine, though neither spoke openly about it. They went on to make 2 more films together, The Spoilers and Pittsburgh, and each time their chemistry deepened. Dietrich was known for her meticulous control of her image, but around Wayne she reportedly let her guard down. For Wayne, the relationship was unlike any other in his life. She represented glamour, mystery, and sophistication, qualities far removed from his public persona as the embodiment of American ruggedness. Yet he couldn't make the relationship public. His marriage, his career trajectory, and his carefully crafted image depended on discretion. The affair lasted several years, overlapping with Wayne's rise to stardom during and after World War II. As his public image solidified into that of a patriotic hero, the romance slowly faded, not in bitterness, but in quiet acceptance. Their lives moved in different directions. Wayne's fame exploded with films like Stagecoach and later The Searchers, cementing his status as a national icon. Dietrich continued her career, entertained troops during the war, and lived a life that defied conventional expectations. Dietrich never spoke openly about the affair, but in her later years, she hinted at the depth of their bond in interviews and letters. Biographers pieced together their romance through testimonies of friends, colleagues, and careful research. It was a relationship that defied easy categorization, not a scandal, not a fleeting tryst, but a genuine connection between 2 stars from radically different worlds. For audiences of the time, the idea of Wayne and Dietrich together would have been almost unimaginable. He was the symbol of traditional American values. She was the epitome of cosmopolitan sensuality, yet that contrast is precisely what made their hidden romance so intriguing. It thrived in the gaps between their public images, tucked away in the spaces Hollywood's publicity machine didn't want anyone to see. Their affair remains one of the most unexpected and fascinating stories of the Golden Age. It didn't dominate headlines, but it quietly joined 2 icons in a romance that existed entirely outside the spotlight, and perhaps because of that, it endured in memory. These 10 hidden romances reveal a side of Hollywood that the public never saw during its so-called Golden Age. Behind the dazzling premieres, the perfectly staged photographs, and the carefully curated studio narratives were real people, flawed, passionate, ambitious, and vulnerable. They navigated love and desire under conditions unlike anything most people will ever experience. Their personal choices unfolded under the watchful eye of powerful studios, a compliant press, and a public eager to believe in the fairy tale. For some, like Clark Gable and Loretta Young, love resulted in secrets so deeply buried that they shaped a child's entire life. For others, like Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, it was a bond that flourished in silence for decades, shielded not by scandal but by loyalty and private understanding. Marilyn Monroe and John F. Kennedy embodied the collision between glamour and power, while Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton turned their affair into a global spectacle that defined an era. Bogart and Bacall found permanence in a relationship that began in risk, and Sinatra and Gardner burned brightly in a love that neither could contain. Ingrid Bergman faced a moral firestorm unlike anything the industry had ever seen. Gary Cooper and Patricia Neal left emotional scars that lasted a lifetime. Joan Crawford and Clark Gable lived their connection across decades in quiet defiance of studio control. and John Wayne and Marlene Dietrich, unlikely partners from different worlds, found a private intensity that never reached the tabloids but lingered in memory. What unites these stories isn't just secrecy. It's the way these stars navigated their humanity in an environment designed to deny it. Studios built images. These relationships often cracked them open. In their own ways, each affair challenged the boundaries between public persona and private truth, revealing that even Hollywood's brightest icons couldn't fully separate their roles from their real lives. Their romances were hidden for different reasons: religion, reputation, power, or survival. But together they form a portrait of a time when love and scandal lived in the shadows, carefully managed but never erased. Decades later, these stories continue to fascinate because they show us that behind every legend was a beating heart, making impossible choices under extraordinary pressure. For more emotional stories, check out this video.